Good day, grade 11th. Today we'll be focusing on your conjunctions. So you will need page 3 and 4 of the booklet that you had to download from the website, as well as the activity towards the end of the booklet for conjunctions. So get those ready before we get started. On page 3, you will see 5 exceptions that you need to pay attention to. I will make some examples for you, and you will have to make sure that you understand each one of these exceptions. The first one, it is always verb 1 in the second sentence that moves around. So the first sentence is never affected. Number 2, if there is a helping verb, moet, wil, sal, kan, gaan, mag, it goes to just before the verb at the end. So you'll have verb 1 first and then verb 2 right next to it. Also remember that is, het, and word. So you can maybe just add this. Is, het, and word go after verb 2. So they go after verb 2, and that's quite important. So those 3 verbs, if you happen to have one of those and they need to move to the end of the sentence for some reason, especially with group 3 conjunctions, you need to remember that these verbs go after verb 2, whereas other helping verbs, your future tense helping verbs, will go before verb 2. Number 3, if we start a sentence with a group 3 conjunction, we put both verbs together in the middle of the sentence and separate them with a comma. Also remember that if you start with a group 3 conjunction, you need to remember it's more than likely that you are going to have some of the following examples. Is, next to each other. Het, het. And word, word. Mainly because in the first sentence, your verb 1 is going to go to the end, and because you have to start with verb 1 in the second sentence, you will have a repeat of verbs. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure that you divide them with a comma. Then number 4 says, if we start with a group 2 conjunction al, and remember al is the only group 2 conjunction that you can start with, the verb comes after al. The it refers to al. Then number 5, if there is a ni in the second sentence, the ni goes to the end of the sentence after the verbs. It's important that you understand that there's specific groups dedicated to specific conjunctions. You may not mix the groups, you may not mix the conjunctions into another group. Group 1 is the group that's not affected at all with moving verbs. Group 2 is mainly your D's, your dus, daarom, derhalve, dan, and so forth. And your group 3s are usually your dats. With group 2, your verb moves so that you have your conjunction and your verb right next to each other. This will be verb 1 of the second sentence though. And then with group 3, you'll have your conjunction and you will have your verb right at the end of your sentence. So it's important that you understand, first of all, which of these conjunctions belong to which group, especially group 2 and group 3, and then also understand the rule for each one of these groups. All right, I'm going to do some examples so that you know what to do with each one of the groups. Obviously, group 1. Group 1 is your easiest one. Group 1, the sentences stay the same. So there's no changing of verbs or moving of verbs. Most important thing to remember, a comma goes before maar and want. There's no need for a comma with en. So if I had to take the first example, die seun spring in die lug op. Hy wil die bal vang. My group 1 conjunction is want. It's important that you always label your group 1 conjunctions. And then just to get you into practice, always identify your verbs in a sentence so that you get into the habit of identifying verbs regardless of the group of conjunction. Obviously, it's not necessary for us to identify the verbs in group 1 conjunctions because they won't be moving. But just for you to get into the habit of knowing that when you do conjunctions, it's important for you with group 2 and group 3 to identify verbs. And there's always benefit in you doing that with your group 1 conjunctions as well. So, because I don't need to change anything in the first or second sentence, All I have to do is rewrite the sentence and replace my full stop with a comma. So your sentence 1 and sentence 2 stays exactly the same. The only difference is my full stop is now going to be replaced with a comma. So your answer will be die seun spring in die lug op, comma, and please remember you will get marked on that comma, so it's important that you remember the comma, comma, want hy wil die bal vang. That's all there is to it. The same with the second example. It says, ek is mal oor pineapple. Kiwi is my gunsteling, maar. Maar is a group 1 conjunction. Just for habit, I identify my verb and I make sure that the sentence stays exactly the same. I just rewrite, ek is mal oor pineapple, comma, then your conjunction, maar, kiwi is my gunsteling. Full stop. That's all there is to it. With your group 2 conjunctions, it's important to remember that your conjunction and verb 1 must be next to each other. For example, dus, the conjunction, and verb 1 next to each other. Your conjunction, verb 1 next to each other. So your conjunction plus verb 1 of your second sentence. So let's do a few examples. Remember that al is the only group 2 conjunction that you are allowed to start a sentence with. So just for a normal conjunction sentence, remember we will tell you to start with a conjunction. If we don't, you follow normal rules and you just combine. So you don't do anything to the first sentence, you don't do anything to the first sentence. In your second sentence, you have to go and identify verb 1. Remember, we're only working with verb 1. Once again, in your second sentence, I identify verb 1. Remember, when I have a helping verb, there will be a second verb in the sentence. It doesn't matter. I'm only focused on verb 1. So my answer, die Suid-Afrikaners gaan vanaand braai. Then my conjunction, daarom. Daarom is a group 2 conjunction. Daarom. Then, after my conjunction, the first thing that needs to appear after my conjunction is my verb 1 of the second sentence, which is steek. So once you've written down your verb 1 next to your conjunction, cross out your verb 1 so that you know that you've used it, and only write what is left of the sentence. In this case, it's hulle die vure aan. Full stop. The second one as well. Die graad 11 werk hard vandag. Voegwoorde sal vir hulle maklik wees. The first sentence stays unchanged, so I just write it as yes. Graad 11 werk hard vandag. And then the second sentence, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. The second sentence starts with my conjunction, dus. And the first thing that needs to appear after my second sentence is my verb 1. So I have dus, then my first verb of the second sentence. And once I've written down my verb, cross it out so that you know that you've used it, and only write down what is left in the order that it appears of the sentence. Sal voegwoorde vir hulle maklik wees. When we do group 3 conjunctions, it's important to remember that verb 1 moves to the end of the sentence. This is verb 1 of the second sentence once again. Verb 1 moves to the end of the sentence. Remember your verb rules. For example, sal, moet, wil, gaan, mag. Those go before verb 2, as well as is, het, and word that goes after verb 2. So also remember that your group 3 are mainly all your dats. Dat, so dat, na dat, voor dat, all your dats. And another one to please take note of is aangesien. Aangesien is one that we use quite often and one that you should know. Alright, so for group 3, once again, I'm not worried about my first sentence. I only worry about my second sentence. That's the one that I'm going to be working with. So in the second sentence with group 3, it's crucial that you identify verb 1 and verb 2, especially if you've noticed that there's one of these verbs. It's crucial that you identify verb 2. Because when you start moving your verbs to the end of the sentence, you need to know where they're going to go. So in my first sentence, I have, in the first example sentence, in the second part of the sentence, I have will as verb 1. Remember that if you have one of these helping verbs, you will definitely have a verb 2. So it's crucial that once you've identified verb 1 as one of those, that you go and identify your verb 2 as well. So once you've identified verb 1 and verb 2, you can start rewriting your sentence. Because for group 3, my verb 1 is going to go to the end of the sentence, but I need to remember that these verbs move before verb 2. So will go to the end of the sentence, but just before wees. Omdat is a group 3 conjunction. So I can rewrite, not worrying about my first part of the sentence. Ons moet almal in ons huise bly. Then my conjunction. Now remember, I'll have my conjunction, omdat. If you think that you're going to forget your verbs, you can always go and write your verbs right at the end of your sentence. So I can write down my omdat, I can leave some space for the rest of my sentence, and then put my 2 verbs right next to each other at the end of the sentence in the order that they should be. Cross them out because you've written them down, and then write what is left so that you make sure that you've written every single word in your sentence and that your verbs are at the end of the sentence. All right. Second example, once again, the first part of the sentence doesn't matter. We're only focusing on the second part. So in the second part of the sentence, I need to go and identify verb 1. No need for me to identify verb 2. There is none. Sodat is a group 3 conjunction. So I combine. Jy moet die blare ophark. And then my conjunction, sodat. So if I have my conjunction, I know that with group 3, my verb needs to go to the end. I can write my verb at the end of the sentence. Cross it out of my original sentence so that I know that I've used it. And then write what's left. Die tuin netjies. There we go. We have to also know how to start with a conjunction. In order for you to start with a conjunction, it's crucial that you understand the rules that go with it. First of all, al is the only group 2 conjunction that you are allowed to start with. You are not allowed to start with anything in group 2 but al. It's the only group 2 conjunction you're allowed to start with. So, when you start with al, the very next thing, remember the verb rule for al in your conjunctions is after your conjunction, group 2 conjunction, the very next thing has to be your verb 1. So please make sure that once you've written down al, the very next thing that appears is verb 1. And this will be verb 1 of the first sentence. Once you've written down verb 1 of the first sentence, you can continue with the rest of sentence 1. In order for you to combine the 2 sentences, it has to be one sentence. There can't be a full stop in the middle. So you're going to replace the full stop with a comma. And the rule for after a comma is always the same. After a comma, the first thing that you write down is verb 1 of the second sentence, and then the rest of the second sentence. So, please make sure that you just change almal gaan, and that it does, for those of you who can't see. So your example is, almal gaan nou by die huis bly. And then the second sentence says, huiswerk word nog steeds getrou gedoen. So in both sentences, it's crucial now, because you're starting with a conjunction, for you to identify verb 1. So I'm going to identify verb 1 in both these sentences. Now, they're asking me to start with al. Once I've written down al, the very next thing that you need to write down is verb 1 of the first sentence. Remember, we work with the sentences individually. We're working with sentence 1 now only. So I start with sentence 1. After al, I write down my verb 1, which is gaan. So I have al, gaan. Once you've written down your verb, cross it out so that you know that it's done. You've written it down. And then continue with what is left in the order that it appears. So almal gaan, al gaan, almal nou by die huis bly, comma, don't forget that comma. Now I need to continue with verb 1 of the second sentence and then the rest. So verb 1 in this sentence is word, so I write down word. Cross out word because I've used it, and then write down whatever is left in the order that it appears. Huiswerk, nog steeds, getrou, gedoen. Full stop. And that's all there is to it. So for group 3 conjunctions, when I start with group 3 conjunctions, the most important thing for you to remember is that I'm going to end up with 2 verbs next to each other. And that's why when we started, I said to you, pay attention to is and is being next to each other, or het and het, or word and word, but only with those 3 conjunctions. So when I start with a group 3 conjunction, it's going to look like this. I'm going to start with a group 3 conjunction. I'm going to make sure that verb 1 of the first sentence goes right to the end of that sentence. And the second sentence, this part after the comma, stays exactly the same as when the part of the comma with your group 2 conjunction as well. So that after the comma, I start with verb 1 and then the rest of the second sentence. Do not start with a group 3 conjunction unless you get a strict instruction to say, begin so. We will tell you to start with a conjunction. If we don't, then you only combine. In this case, we are starting with a conjunction. So, I have 2 sentences. Ons werk hard by die huis. Ons gaan net hersiening in die klas doen. So I work with each one of my sentences individually. I start with the first one. In the first one, I want to make sure that I identify verb 1. There's only a verb 1, no need for me to identify a verb 2. In the second sentence, I want to make sure that I also identify my verbs. In this case, I have gaan as my verb 1. So once I've identified my 2 verbs, I can rewrite my sentence. I'm starting with my conjunction. Therefore, it's a group 3 conjunction. Therefore, I have to move my verb 1 to the end of the sentence of the first sentence in order for this sentence to adhere to the group 3 conjunction rule. So aangesien ons hard by die huis werk. So I've moved my verb to the end. I need to now remember my comma. So I have my comma. Then I have to start with verb 1 of the next sentence. Now the next sentence says, ons gaan net hersiening in die klas doen. In that sentence, we have gaan as verb 1. So I start with gaan. Once you've written down gaan, cross it out so that you know that it's done. And only write what is left in the order that it appears. Gaan ons net hersiening in die klas doen. All right. Now it's time for you to try these sentences on your own. What I've done is, in each one of these sentences, I've already identified the verbs for you in the second sentence, purely because the instruction says, verbind die volgende sinne met die voegwoord tussen hakies. This is the instruction for all of them. What I want you to do is just add to number 14. You'll see that number 13 and 14 is exactly the same sentence. What I want you to do is for number 14, just add there in brackets, begin met. So for number 14, you are going to start with alhoewel, whereas number 13, you're just going to combine with alhoewel. So the instruction is the same for all 14 sentences. And then number 14, you're just going to start with. So in each one of these sentences, I don't even have to read the first sentence. I don't have to understand the first sentence even. I can write all of the first sentences down exactly as it appears, and I'm only going to do the work with a second sentence. So it's important that when you get an activity like this, just to test your memory, that you go and you label and number the group of conjunctions that you're dealing with. No, write a little one for want, dat is now group 3, anders group 2, daarom group 2, and so forth. And then once you've labeled your conjunctions, make sure that you label your verbs as well. It's important that you understand that your verbs play a significant role, and therefore you have to identify your verbs before you even start. So for number 1, I'm just going to add a comma and the want. Nothing else happens. I identified verb 1, even though I'm not going to work with it, just to get me into the habit of identifying my verbs. Number 2, my is going to go to the end of the sentence. Number 3, my verb gaan will go after the conjunction in the middle. Number 4, group 2 conjunction. I'll have group 2 conjunction and then daarom loop, and then the rest of the sentence. Number 5, aangesien in the middle, is goes to the end of the sentence, but pay attention to the nie. Can't go past nie. And so forth. So you're going to continue with this activity for me for today. And then I'm not going to mark it because you'll notice, and please don't cheat yourself, at the end of this pack, you have the memo for these sentences. So try without numbering everything now while you're looking at this. Try and number the conjunctions so that you can familiarize yourself with the conjunctions. And once you're done with these 15 sentences, go and try and mark them and see where you went wrong. If you have any questions regarding conjunctions, you need to please make sure that you WhatsApp me on the WhatsApp group before 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. All right, enjoy, guys.